This is the Build with Tech podcast, where we dive into the minds of business leaders, building tech-enabled businesses to launch and scale profitable enterprises. With your host, Ray Ortega.
Welcome to the Build with Tech podcast, where we explore how technology drives business success. Our guest is John Costa today, the founder and CEO of Repubit. John has spent over 30 years at the forefront of technology and digital media and also learning. In launching Repubit in 2014, which focuses on corporate learning portals and autonomous self-directed learning. Utilizing the lean startup methodologies, he has consistently developed products that customers love and that employees find exceptionally user-friendly. John, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Ray. This is exciting. I appreciate it.
Awesome. It's great to have you here. We had a really great conversation the other day before we scheduled this. And so obviously there's a lot of story here that I want people to hear. You had a great story, and especially in your background and how you started your company. If you can you tell the audience, basically just give a background of who you are, your company, and then how'd you get started?
Sure. Name's John Costa. The company is Repubit, stands for Republishing with Interactive Technology. That's the IT piece of it. And how did I get into this industry? This dates way back to the Macintosh computer at Drexel University when they bought them for us. And that was really what kind of launched me into a lot of these different areas. I took a job at Cigna when I got out of school and right back at computers because I was bringing this desktop technology that I knew and understood to an industry that hadn't used them at all prior. I took a little sabbatical. I'm going to go through some history for you. I took some time off. I went to Berklee College of Music after Cigna, and that's where I met a number of people that were developing recording studios and designing them in New York City. So ended up, instead of the music career that I'm going to launch this, right back into computers because it was the age of like digital recording when that was first breaking out. So I was designing the technology behind this stuff. And so tech became the thing that I did and excelled at. And at a party one time, I met a gentleman from New York City who was in the advertising industry. And he asked me, have you ever heard of a thing called the Macintosh, the Mac computer? I'm like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I've got one. I've had one since they were invented. Oh, can you come down to our office tomorrow? One thing led to another, and I walked out of there with a job offer to be the head of their new Macintosh department. They still had these things on skids. So I'm setting up how this whole thing evolved from the advertising industry. It worked its way into digital publishing for magazines and books and product packaging and things like that. So I became the tech guy that was involved with all these transitions that were going on. That's what really excited me. I forgot about the music career. It's still a hobby. I still do that, but I was really excited to be right in the middle of all this innovation. That's what got me fired up. So with the digital publishing, I got a chance to work with the Kindle before the thing even had a name. Amazon, because in this printing industry that I was in, we were supplying them all the books that they sold. They started out as just reselling books online to people instead of bookstores. But they decided to go electronic. They wanted to create some electronic form of these books. And they started testing out different technologies. They came to us, and it ended up on my desk because I was the guy that all the new digital stuff fed through, and I had an engineering team behind me. And so we got to play with the tools that they were looking at and experiment with different file formats and things. The iPad came out. Man, that was a game changer. That's when it struck me that we can use this stuff to help people learn and teach. Yeah, it was great entertainment. But with the iPad and the iPhone, now able to stream live video and in real time without glitching and high resolution, that was, to me, what kind of pushed me over the edge to say, I want to do this for education and for helping people. There's a couple of things that nudged me along the way. During that tenure, I tell this story a lot. There was a opportunity where I was collecting and digitizing all of the computer magazines. Mm-hmm. This actually helped me get that kind of guru label that sales guys all used because they could call me about anything that they heard of that was high tech. And I had years of Computer Age and Computer User and all those magazines that were out, Macworld, on, back then it was CDs. Yeah. And I could quickly search them and tell them within minutes what things were. They would get somebody, I remember this one call about Salesforce. What is this Salesforce thing? My customer's going to Salesforce. And within seconds, I explained the whole thing to them. And I can't believe you know all this stuff. I didn't. But I had tools at my disposal that would quickly get me the answers. So if I had to give you a reason for why Repubit formed, that is one of them. Because I want to give everyone the opportunity to have all the information they need to perform the job well, to excel, and to really succeed in their business and in their career. And that's knowledge, information, the sharing of that, and the ease of getting at that knowledge. So in a nutshell, that's why Repubit formed. And during that whole time, for about 14 years or so, I was also teaching as an adjunct in this technology area. I taught at NYU for a bit, and it was back then called Norwalk State Technical College in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. I taught CAD programming. I taught, what else? I guess it was production, computer design, and digital publishing production with all the tools that were out, the Adobe suites, et cetera. And that got me intrigued again about teaching. I love teaching and I love explaining things to people. So again, yet one more reason why Repubit is what it is. It's our interest in helping people and helping everyone succeed, getting knowledge to them quickly.
That's awesome. So I know you talked about the background, but where do you think that ultimately came from, your original want to tell people and teach people and stuff like that?
Probably came from my parents. My father was a professor of mechanical engineering. He was the one that got me interested in helping with the CAD because he wanted to bring that out, and I was using it at work. And so together we set up his department, and I helped him as an assistant for a couple of years. And he said, "You want to teach your own class?" Sure. And that was my launch into it. He helped me. Going back, if you want to go back even further, in high school, he was the guy that pushed me he said, "You need to go into computers." It was like that prescient guy about plastics in the 40s. Go into plastics. Plastics is the future. Well, that's when computers were coming out. So you got to go into computers. Of course, as the kid, no, I'm not doing that. I want to be a musician.
It's funny because we share very similar backgrounds in that regard. I didn't even realize that because we didn't talk about this when we actually talked last time about the music side. I wanted to get into music as well. And my father said, you need to get into computers. Same thing. And I ended up saying no, and I went into the music business and did that for 6 years. And then I went back to my dad. I'm like, "You're right. I should get in computers." So that's a funny story that you were telling that. And I'm like, oh my God, that's like similar background that I had when it came to your stuff. And so the entrepreneurial side of it, though, because you love to teach or whatever, but you have a company and you obviously built a company around it. So how did you get into the entrepreneurial side? What triggered that moment?
That trigger was, I did offshoring for a long time. So we started engaging. I had a lot of multinational companies, but the publishing industry wanted to drive the cost down so far that we couldn't do a lot of the production onshore anymore. So the company as I was working for had me go out and look for teams that were in China and India. We had some teams in Africa that were at a much lower price point cost-wise to do the production. And I was watching a lot of my colleagues losing their jobs, and I also watched the innovation leave. So that whole EPUB world is still there. Apple still publishes EPUBs. Amazon puts their Kindle books. That's a form of an EPUB. EPUB's a file format. But the advancement and the innovation left when we pushed it out the door for all the production. And we didn't have to do that innovation. And so I wanted to bring some of that back, and I wanted to take advantage of a lot of the expertise that was here. I had worked with animators that fell out of Disney when some of their work was either offshored or moved back out to California, out of the Central Florida area. And like, well, yeah, you guys could focus on education. Some of them were teaching at University of Central Florida, which is here in town. That's where I met them. And we created a gaming environment using all the production methodologies that we had evolved and devised in the printing industry. There's a certain methodology for storing your materials and naming conventions and numbering things and versioning stuff, iterating various types of files that would be used in different areas, some for the web, some for the movie itself, some for trailers. And we created this workflow and this process that is something that I'm doing now. We've dubbed it learning engineering, but I'm bringing this technology to the learning environment now because they're ripe for it. They've got a tremendous amount of outlets where they can deliver learning material. They're going mobile very quickly, and students today want to use their phones to do that. So I think I'm getting off track, but
I think you're on track. So basically what you're saying is the reason why you formed into a business because you just saw opportunity. You saw an opportunity to get into this, to take what you already knew, what you were already experiencing when you were working at a job, and then convert that into a business of your own. If that's what it sounds like to me.
That was the idea.
Yeah.
Did I know how much work it would be when I jumped off?
Yeah.
I know. I moaned about working 10 hours a day before.
So when you jumped off, that's a good segue into my next question. So when you jumped off, was it a clear jump, or did you do like freelance first, built your rapport with clients before you actually went full time, or how did you take that leap?
I dove.
Go head first.
Yeah, there was no freelance side projects or anything like that. It was a conscious decision when we were, the organization I was with decided it wanted to close a whole bunch of its U.S.-based operations, and they wanted to move all operations offshore. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. Yeah, I could teach you guys how to do all this stuff, but I would rather support my colleagues and all these people that I've worked with over the years. So that was my jumping point. That was the tipping point when I said, I'm going to try and do this. I also wanted to be able to show my kids, because I had kids that were in middle school and just entering high school at the time, that you can depend on yourself. Some of their friends their parents were losing jobs and things. I'm like, there's no reason for that. You could take all this knowledge that you developed over the years. You learn in every job that you've had. You're learning something new, and you're building a model for how you operate. And I just thought it was the right time to push this forward because the market needed it. I was getting pushback from publishers and not wanting to go this digital route because they had a business that was locked in printing books and having students buy books. And it didn't need to be that way. So I had some grand plans that I was going to build this massive company and be delivering learning material to the entire planet, one step at a time.
One step at a time.
But yeah, it was a leap. And it was a transition phase too. If I can share this with your audience, you need to get out of the mindset of being an employee in a large company to being an employee and a promoter of your own company. And that's a big transition. I went from I had a marketing department and a legal department and people I could just call to get things done. Now I had to wear all of those hats. And I also had to always think about stuff that I was doing in terms of how is this helping grow the company. There's two ways you look at it. You can work in your company or you could work for your company. And if you're working for it, you're building it and you're helping it grow. When you're working in it, you don't have time to work for it because you're doing the work. Yeah, it was a different mindset that I had to just ingest.
Yeah, and I want to make the distinction for the audience is when you're talking about working in it, like for instance, a lot of us who are technical, when we start our own company, we're physically doing all the technical work. That's working in it. Where working on it is where you're off of the day-to-day operations in the sense of working with like clients or specific deliverables, and you're focusing on the structure of the business, how you're going to move the business forward, how you're going to expand marketing, sales, like all the different. And I just want to make that distinction. Is that kind of the distinction you're talking about? Like between the two?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I used to think, wow, why do these sales guys make so much money? Well, we wouldn't make any money if they weren't selling something. And that's has to happen while the work is being done. So if you're doing the work, you're not selling. Yeah. You're not out there.
And I like that you're saying that, though, because this leads to my next thing is, and I ran into this in my company, is the moment you need to step back and run the company. Tell us, like, when did you reach that moment? Or have you reached that moment? Because you could be doing like 80-20, right? It just depends on where you're at. So explain to me that whole transition of you starting to step back versus.
Yeah, I still think I'm probably the 70-30 range.
Yeah.
It's cyclical. I got to the point where I stepped back and was running the business, during COVID of all things. Because what we do, we're bringing education to people, allowing them to package it up and deliver it all electronically and, like you said before, autonomously. That means that the material's all there, the lectures are all there, everything's packaged together. That was how Repubit was devised, so that it could take all these different types of media, put this podcast in a Repubit publication if you wanted to, and run it and stream it, pull out transcripts, translate it into 17 different languages, and have all that material there curated together. When we went into lockdown, a lot of my customers who were doing classroom-based training, they had an epiphany. They're like, we're screwed. That's probably not nice to say, but basically they were told you can't have classroom sessions anymore.
Exactly.
You got to lock down. And one of them, I can share this story later. I had it on the list of things to talk about, but they were able to navigate that entire mess of lockdown because we had already turned some of their classes into self-running packages on the Repubit platform, where there's assessments and lectures and everything were in there. And there were some surprises that they got out of it. I'll go through the story when it's appropriate. But
yeah, I was going to ask you, is that something that was considered like a success story for you?
Yeah, that was I think a great success.
Awesome. Yeah, if you want, you can elaborate on it. I'd love to hear that success.
Oh, sure. All right. So it's a company that's had a long history of training people in the investment market, how to invest in stocks and how to trade futures and options and real estate, the whole gambit. The Trading Academy is what they call themselves. And it was classroom based. They were in probably 30 some odd countries around the world. And they had training rooms where they would fly people in, train for a solid week, 40 hours of fire hose, but learning. And then they go back and they could practice with tools that the Academy had built. They reached out to me one year because they were having lots of last minute signups and they were paper based. They would print out these binders for each class, hundreds and hundreds of pages of materials. And if somebody signed up at the last minute, you know what? They didn't get a binder because one wasn't printed for them. So they started sharing PDFs of all the material. Next thing you know, they've got their PDFs showing up for sale on all these markets all over the place. This has to stop. So they engaged me back then to secure their digital content, their IP. They did not want delivered that way, and they wanted it locked down. My platform was designed originally to sell digital magazines and books with security on them so that you could control the length of time people could see it, et cetera. And so that's what we did. But I'm in there, I'm saying, we could record your lectures, or we could put videos in, and we can do this, and we could do that. And they're like, no, just secure our PDFs. But they've been a long time customer of mine. They're wonderful. A year into it, you know what? Remember you said something about that we maybe wouldn't have to print all this stuff? Can we try that? Boom. $2 million a year in savings because reducing the print costs. Yeah. And then a few years after that, they wanted to say, what if we did a digital version of this whole course? They were unique because they had a broadcast show that they would do. They would do these live radio broadcasts. That's what we're doing here. For their members. They were a membership or type organization, and they would interview people on investing and stuff. So they had studios. I'm like, well, just go into the studio and record the classroom sessions. It'll look nice. The studio's gorgeous, and they even had green screen capability, so they got the slides showing up on the side. And we did a couple, and they loved it, and the audience loved it. And that was right before COVID hit. And so we already had their futures class and their basic investment class already in the can, so to speak, when this happened and they went on lockdown. So it was really no big deal for them. They said, we can't have classroom sessions, but we've got our two core courses here are available digitally, and you could sign up and the whole thing is there. And then they would have an online lecture like this, where once a week, instead of jammed into a 5-day, 8-hour-a-day session, and the audience liked it even better. So their user base went from people that could afford to fly into these 40 sites around the world to people in about 100. They're up to 172 countries now that are tapping into their learning material. And their user count went from 100,000 to 300,000 during that period. So from a success story standpoint, I think it's a wonderful success, and they loved it because one of their vice presidents called me one day. You realize you kept us in business.
Yeah.
And that to me, I was like, oh, thank you for sharing that, because that's just music to my ears. And that's what I want to do. I want to share knowledge with anybody and help people share that knowledge.
That's awesome, man. That is an awesome story, because I know during the pandemic, I know several clients of ours, like they basically had to shut down because industry shut down. But that is an awesome story that you were able to help a company not only like just pivot essentially from their normal business model into this business model. You fell in. This is your bag. Like, this is your thing. And that's awesome. When that was happening, did you run into any struggle? Did you have any major like struggles or complications in that transition? Or was it pretty much you were already providing the solution that they needed throughout that process?
I had the solution already worked out. And as you recall before, I was impatient because that first day I'm like trying to get them to do everything. Yeah. And they're like, no, we just want people to stop stealing our PDF files.
Yeah.
Stop with the video talk. And analytics, I'm hitting them with analytics. Oh, all this data we collect on who's using it and where and when and how and what time. All that stuff was at their disposal as well. And just if you're patient with it, over time, they'll absorb it. I had been living this for the last decade and a half, so it all just is in my head. I got to remember that I got to step people through this logical approach to adding more and more capabilities.
It's good. This brings me to another subject that I wanted to talk about real quick, and you hit it. Actually, I wasn't going to talk about it, but now that you hit it, I'm going to talk about it. So the other day, I was talking to a coach consultant, and they were saying how, like, when you're building a business, you want to build a business and have a solution to a bleeding problem versus a solution where you have to argue, right, the solution, right? In your case, would you say that for the pandemic, you were having to convince people to go this route? And then after the pandemic, that was now the bleeding issue that
we had done a marketing campaign at late 2018, first half of 2019, or first quarter. And we were hitting all these people that taught continuing medical education and continuing financial education, et cetera. And we got lots of callbacks for explanations, demos, and things like that, but no takers.
Yeah.
We're just a little bit too far out in front of where they thought they wanted to be or needed to be. And I had dubbed that whole campaign a failure because we sold nothing until late 2019. The phone started to ring. Remember the stuff you were showing us? And so 2019 and 2020 were like banner years when that's when I had to dive back into being in the business instead of running it because we got too much work. Yeah. And innovation and stuff. So I had to put on my engineer's hat and do it. And then what happened in 2022? The pipeline was empty because I was working in my business instead of on it.
Oh, and yes, that is something that happens a lot when you're doing that. I'll attest to that. And for the audience who's listening and watching, what he's talking about, and some of you've already got it, but as he's talking about is if you're the guy selling, but you're also the guy that's doing the work. Like when you're doing the work, you're not selling and there's no pipeline. You're not building that pipeline. And then obviously decide I'm going to go back to selling, you have nobody actually doing the work. So then you get backed up. So it's like a catch-22 because you're constantly, it's like a tug of war back and forth between the two. And so that's what that was about. I'm assuming that's what you're saying. So basically what you're telling me is that you helped spread the virus in 2020 so that you can build your business.
It was a marketing flaw. Right?
In 2019, the marketing wasn't working. So I went ahead and spread the virus so that everyone can call me back in 2020 and say, I need your
stuff. My God.
You heard it here, folks. John was the one who spread the virus. Not joking. No, but that's awesome. Man. That is a great story because I know people, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially myself included, you go through this thing where you're doing what you think is the right thing and you think it's going to work and it doesn't work. And then a lot of people just give up at that point and go, oh, I'm just going to do something. I'm going to veer off into a different. And sometimes it just takes one little thing, one event that kind of triggers what you were doing to actually work. And so that's a great story about that. So tell me, where's your business at? What are you guys doing today?
The new stuff that we're venturing down, I mentioned, and this is something actually that new entrepreneurs should think about as part of their growth. At a certain point in my career, it forked, and I started volunteering in various committees. I was on an EPUB Technology Standards Committee. We developed the standard for that file format. We started doing work with the IEEE, the Engineering Society, and they have a Learning Technology Standards Committee in their group. And the reason I'm saying that to dive into that stuff is that's going to keep you abreast of what's happening and what's coming down the road. When you're working with other experts and constantly interacting, you're getting new ideas and you're exchanging ideas, and things will spark from that. That's it. You may not get paid for that kind of stuff, but volunteering in those areas gets you in the circles that you need to be in. I ended up chairing an educational ebook committee for STEM education, and that was exactly what Repubit was. It was creating an interactive form of a book with data analytics. We called it the Actionable Data Book. And that would give feedback to the teachers and the instructors of how the material is being used, what's happening with it, and opened up doorways for us. We did a military project for the Navy and one for the Army as well, and creating learning and training materials in an environment like that. So it's a very comfortable environment. It's a book. It's your textbook. But you know what? Interactive things going on, and they're all collecting data on your answers and your activities and things like that. And you can develop new pathways. The instructors get feedback from this stuff. That was how I kept pivoting and massaging where the company's going. What I'm doing lately is bringing back a lot of the expertise that I gained in the printing and publishing industry for automating workflow and process and manufacturing process and standards within that area, bringing that to education now. So we just went through a whole training scenario where we got a certificate in learning in the flow of work. So it's not the output of redesigning your workflow and your process, especially in the education field. We're working with a couple of universities now on their development of online learning materials and the process behind it and the time that it takes, shrinking that time way down because we're applying commercial processes and commercial methods to an education and academic world. It hasn't had exposure to that yet. The latest thing is, I think, is a consulting add-on to this where we can go in and help an organization figure out their process, no matter what it is. This methodology, it's from a group called Apply Synergies. They call it the 5 Moments of Need. A friend of mine, Conrad Goffredson, developed this whole methodology where you need to know how to do something when you're trying to do something new, when you're trying to solve a problem, when you're trying to fix an issue that you've got going on, when you're trying to expand. So there's a bunch of areas that come into play here. And that's where Repubit is now focusing its attention. We've created a new product we're calling it Digital Coach. It's still just a digital publishing product, but I'm not selling the Play-Doh here. I'm selling a product that was built with the tools that we've got at people's disposal and then trying to help them build their own, so that if they switch over to methodologies like that, their employees can all excel. Meta, I just sat in on a presentation yesterday in our course alumni thing. Meta has adopted that methodology, the 5 moments of learning need and digital coaching for employees for learning in the flow of work. So they don't have to stop and go and find something out. It's right there at their fingertips. And all your training and support material is designed that way. AI is another thing that we've added onto it. We actually added 10 of the very popular LLMs to our authoring. And so we're calling it a ghost drafter. It'll help you draft your content and your material, and it'll voice it. It'll translate it if you wanted to. But we're speeding up the process of creating and sharing learning with some of the latest tools.
Do you find yourself custom coding that, or are you using a tool?
We've got partners. I have a technology development partner that he adds on the APIs. That's one thing that has been a part of my career. I try whenever possible not to custom code things, but to integrate them.
Yeah.
So everybody's built their own bits of expertise. Ours is in this whole publishing environment. That environment is already built and created, but we built it with hooks into it so we could add on new tools and new elements. We built a narrator a couple of years ago, and it'll use the Amazon Poly engine. So again, another API. We connect to Amazon Poly, pointed to the file that's got the text in it for a publication, and tell it to read it. And so whatever language it types it in, it'll read. But should we have built that from scratch? No, that would have been crazy. You want to build things and integrate stuff together. So you let the experts build the best tool that they can and focus on supporting it and growing it, and then connect them together to make a solution.
Have you looked at make.com? Have you seen that product at all?
No.
If I were you, I would have you guys and your guys look at that product. It's called make.com. And for those listening, if you've watched any of my previous podcasts, whatever, or any videos, you'll notice that I'm actually talking about Make a lot. But the reason why is I'm in awe about make.com. Essentially, it's a drag and drop. There's like Zapier.
Yeah.
So this is a competitor to Zapier, and the interface is far more easy. It basically, you're building workflows using a visual interface, and it automatically attaches to a lot of those APIs that you normally have to integrate into. It has it as part of its library by default. You don't have to download a Zap. It's already in there. I watched a video on YouTube. In fact, after this podcast, I'll send you the link to a YouTube channel where this guy's an expert in Make, and he shows how you can automate all of your workflows and all of your systems that integrate everything using a drag and drop interface. It's super simple.
That would be cool.
No coding required. It's phenomenal. I was blown away by it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we tout about the Repubit platform, is that it's a no-code environment to build digital content, audio versions, replica versions that look just like your PDF, but you drop in whatever you want to. 3D animation, VR stuff could be placed in it. It's a curation platform, and we put hooks on everything. So there's really nothing that can't be pushed in through APIs or extracted.
And the thing is, when we talked last time, what I loved about your platform and the way you explained it is the fact that digital content protection is such a huge deal. It has been for years. In fact, yesterday, I was talking to one of my developers about all of these people doing online courses. And then these online courses are using, let's say, YouTube, right? If you have a very specific course module or video, anybody can steal the video off of you. You just download it. Having a type of container that protects your content. And so in your realm, you're protecting publications, right? You're protecting content, essentially. And so that's what I liked about your product and what you're doing. And then you're also expanding on it. Explain to me, like, in the next 5 years, where do you see your product going?
There's a number of things where the product can advance. A lot of it's around, or the latest things are around AI and AI generation. The use of generative AI in learning is going to replace a bunch of the various bots that are manually assembled. Now, there's something, and we built it into our mini interface for these AI engines, but there's something, if you've heard the term RAG, retrieval augmented generation, right? What that really means is that you got this big library of stuff that the AI knows, and that's it. But there's other stuff out there, new things, changes, modifications. And so you let the answering engine that you're prompting go and search out for the latest stuff compared to what was back in the other library that it's already ingested, and then give you an up-to-date answer with the latest information. I think that is going to do a lot for research, especially in the medical field, actually in a number of places. Then there's another type of AI. There's a project I'm doing right now with a violinist. She's a performer, and she travels in the elite musical circles around the globe. She teaches at a university in Frankfurt, Germany. She's got residents up in Vancouver, in Canada, British Columbia. And she brings in students to learn, but she wants to expand her expertise. She's created what she's calling the Ming Shi Academy. Right? What this is an online academy where all of the materials, learning materials and videos and things like that are created and delivered in our type of platform in Repubit. But then we're working with a professor in Spain who's creating an AI around music and sound and using visual and audio cues to understand the student. So there's a technical term, they either empathic AI or psychopathy, right? And that's for the AI to be able to know, not know, but sense based on visual cues, your eye movements and your muscle movements and things. Are you tense? Are you nervous? Are you relaxed? Are you enjoying yourself, or are you hating this lesson? And she wants to build a coach that will do that and work with the student to eliminate fear. That's her whole model, is about elimination of fear. She could do that so naturally when she's in person. She just senses what you're feeling. Her level of empathy is off the charts, and she gets them to relax, and they excel. 99, I think, percent, she says, of her students go on to be in orchestras around the world. So building an AI to do this kind of thing using cameras and sound quality evaluation and stuff is on her list of things to do. And it's not easy. I think it will get there. It's never, a computer cannot feel empathy, but it could take triggers from what's going on screen and on camera and stuff and compare that to all the other data sets.
Yeah, as long as it has the library, yeah.
Yeah, so correct. And that's where I think that this is going to lend itself a lot to that. And I'm hoping that Repubit over the next 5-6 years will leverage where we're at right now and figure out how to sell better, for one thing. But
yeah,
get our audience to the point where they're taking advantage of this stuff. So we're learning it. We're on that bleeding edge, talking about learning engineering, chairing the committee for corporate and workforce use of learning engineering for IEEE. We're studying this stuff now, and we're simplifying it, and then we're delivering it. Repubit's delivering it as part of its tool set so that our audience could take advantage of that. And if we get better at doing that, then there's growth opportunity. There's a lot more people that could be brought into the organization. And that's my strategy for the next coming years. We're doing great. We've grown tremendously. We've probably got 600,000 or 700,000 users now around the world on the platform across a bunch of customers. But
that is awesome. It sounds like you're still diving into a lot of tech yourself. Like you're really involved in that. How do you stay on top of, like, do you use sites, or do you have like specific books, or how do you stay on top of all this new technology and how it's going to help you?
A lot of it is just, through things like this, listening to various technology podcasts. I attend a number of shows and conferences in that tech space, but I do get a lot of insight from the volunteer work that I end up doing for the Learning Guild,
Nice.
the trade shows that they run. with IEEE and the learning technology committees. We're lucky enough that I'm exposed to people that are bleeding edge. There's a gentleman from Boeing in our committees. There's people from Meta, they were Facebook before, now the Meta. And everything that they're doing is testing out different tools and different concepts and then sharing that.
Nice.
Because everybody benefits. Nobody's sharing trade secrets. If there's IP to be discussed, they have to say something so that people can't take and run with it, or they just have to leave it out of the meeting. Yeah. We're very clear about that. But in terms of learning, like you just pointed me towards Make, I'll be looking that up in about an hour.
Do you have any books or podcasts specifically that you're really into that you could share with the audience?
They're old books. For the stuff I'm doing, I pulled a couple off the bookshelf.
Okay.
In case you asked me, this one goes way back. Dale Carnegie.
Oh my God. I bought that for my daughter when she was in high school. I said, you need to read this.
Yeah.
I love that one.
Winning friends and influencing people. The premise that he sets and the ethics and standards behind his whole approach hold true today and forever. My mother got me into a class. I took that class, and the book came with it, just out of college. And what a difference it made. Oh, my gosh. There were people in the class. There was a senior executive from a bank. I'll leave the bank's name out of it. But he had to give a 3-minute presentation on how to make a peanut butter sandwich, and he froze. He was petrified. And that was eye-opening to me. I'm like, wow, we can get over this. I'm not the only one that gets nervous talking in front of a crowd. 20 years later, I've got 15 years of teaching under my belt, standing for hours in front of a class, talking. And I'm giving back a little bit today because I chair a Toastmasters group. I was president, and now I'm VP of education for them. And it's the same type of thing. We're trying to bring young people, get them in front of the audience, give them feedback on how they sound, how they're presenting. And that's a huge part of career success, too. Communications is a big part of it. Another one that I liked and actually had to reread recently is this one from Alan Weiss. It's consulting projects, but it's basically how you structure your proposal and how you get to know your customer. And so your proposal is almost like just a summary of what you had discussed and have almost agreed upon right now. So it's like a no-brainer. It's not a pitch, and it's not the spaghetti approach that you're just like, oh, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, and just throw it all out there and hope that they grab one of them. It's a different type of approach to organizing your materials. So those are a couple of them that I've liked and enjoyed and still use concepts that I learned. The bookshelf behind me there, 2 of those shelves are full of business books.
Yeah.
How to sell, spin selling, this. And yeah, they're all great. That whole series on lean startups.
Yeah.
That was a great set too.
It's funny you just mentioned spin selling. That's the same methodology we use.
Oh, is it?
And so, yeah, because I went to UCF. I went to University of Central Florida in the business program, and the sales program at UCF uses spin selling techniques.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, that's our standard selling technique.
When we started early on, when I first started launching digital asset management for corporations, we created these big databases of all your digital media, your videos, your pictures, your templates, all that stuff. And 3M had software that we were using. So I bought the software from them, and we had to figure out how are we going to sell this stuff. So they sponsored a spin selling session for us. It was like a week long, and you did all kinds of acting and fake sales calls and things like that, but it was all spin selling. I still have the book. The spin selling book is still up there on the shelf.
Yeah, it's awesome. In the class that we had, it was the same thing. We had to break out into these small rooms and basically act out. It was pretty cool. But I had already done years of phone sales, so but it was a different methodology of selling because I had come from the telemarketing world, where it was just hardcore sell, close, and spin selling is very consultative. And so I liked it better.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that. In those lean startup books, when they're talking about selling, they suggest go volunteer at a call center and thicken your skin up. Get used to being hung up on and yelled at, because it's not the end of the world. But that's a fear that I'd say I have. I don't want to be a bother and pester somebody, and to get over it. There's another thing that was in that lean selling. I told a couple of people that I've worked with recently, the suggestion was go to a grocery store. Now, we don't bargain here at all in this country.
Yeah.
So go to a grocery store, and when you get to the clerk, say, I don't really want to pay $3 for this bread. How about $2.50? And see what happens.
Yeah. Get cussed at. Develop that thick skin.
It's research. It's research.
So, John, we're almost out of time here, but I did have a couple things I wanted to go over. First of all, do you have any words for anybody who's trying to be an entrepreneur, who's looking at becoming an entrepreneur? Any advice that you want to give out to them?
Let's see.
Learn how to sell.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. If you're thinking about being an entrepreneur, remember that if it's a passion, it's got to be a passion. You got to be dedicated to it. More than just going to make some money with this. Because the first year or so, it was pretty lean. It was pretty negative, as a matter of fact, financially, I should say. Yeah, the excitement is there, and you're going to be the king of the world soon, but not yet.
Got all these endorphins flying.
Oh, yeah. It really is, and be patient with it, because if you're coming out of a corporate environment, you've got to change your mindset.
Absolutely.
And then I would say just leverage the tools that are out there. You do some research. Get involved in some local networking groups or like your chamber where you could talk to other entrepreneurs. Orlando's got something that I was just repointed to, or it's called Orlandopreneur or the Million Cups.
Yeah.
If you get into those groups, everybody's in the same boat and they're sharing ideas of tools that you can leverage. There's actually an organization for entrepreneurs. I think is it called SCORE?
Yes.
In Orlando.
By the way, that's where I'm sitting right now.
Oh, it is?
Okay. Yeah, because I do SCORE mentoring. I do mentoring for SCORE.
Oh, no kidding. Beautiful. There you go.
That was the meeting I was just at that ran over.
Yeah, it's places like that where you can get assistance.
Yeah.
Because I think it's going more and more that direction where, with the work at home scenarios and the better ability to get benefits and things like that used to be just part of the corporate package. Medical benefits still need some transition and transformation in order to support an environment, but there are a lot of people that are making good careers out of sourcing for multiple organizations, and they are entrepreneurs. They're developers. They've got a skill set, and they offer that skill set on a fractional basis to whomever needs it. And you still need all the business and the back end tools to do your billing and your invoicing. And if nobody's doing your invoicing, doesn't matter how much work you do, you're not getting paid. So you got to remember all that stuff. Think about it, map things out, keep track of your time, and by all means, work on your business as much as in your business.
Absolutely. Great information. So, John, tell the audience, how can people find you?
Oh, yeah, I didn't think of that.
Hey, spin selling. Now's the pitch moment. This is the pitch moment. That's it.
I mean, on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn, John B. Costa. If you search Repubit, you'll find me. There's repubit.com, contact information in there. I should have a slide queued up to just pop on screen, but I don't.
That's okay, because actually we're going to put all that stuff in the show notes in the description.
Okay.
So I'll just get the information from you. We'll put it in there. And then I'd also like to get the information of the books and everything and put all that in there as well, so that the audience can take advantage of all the stuff that you've mentioned and go look at that stuff for themselves. So we're going to go and put all that stuff in the description. So, John, it was great conversation. I know we had a bunch of other questions, but due to time, we didn't get to those, but we always can do another podcast later, go even deeper. But thank you for being on the podcast. And for those that are watching, definitely follow, subscribe, all of the things that you do to follow the podcast. And I'll see you guys in the next one. And John, again, thank you for being on. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Ray.